Since my brother's marriage, my living arrangement has comprised just my mother and me. Despite being frustrated with her attitude, I'm grateful for the upbringing she provided. Unexpectedly, she decided to distance herself from me. Despite my substantial financial support, she, with the involvement of my brother and his wife, evicted me from our home. This betrayal is something I can't forgive, and I am determined to retaliate against them with double the force. I go by the name Emily and am currently 25 years old. A few years back, my father passed away, and my brother Tom, who is a decade older, departed after tying the knot. Consequently, I find myself cohabitating with my mother. The truth is, I've harbored dissatisfaction about living with her. Once I began working, my mother quit her part-time job and assumed a lethargic lifestyle at home. What's more, she treated me as though I were her personal maid. Emily, why isn't dinner ready yet? Oh, by the way, I've run out of money this month. Can you spare an extra $200? And while I'm out today, make sure you clean my room. And the demands just go on. The litany of requests seems never ending. Some might suggest that if I'm so discontented, I should just live independently. Admittedly, the thought of leaving the house has crossed my mind several times. However, she is my biological mother. After my father's passing, she single-handedly raised me. Tom, my brother, moved far away after getting married, and his wife, Catherine, vehemently refuses to live with my mother. Consequently, relying on him is not a viable option. Given the circumstances, as her daughter, I've never entertained the idea of abandoning her. Yet, as a human being, regardless of the biological connection, there's a limit to what I can endure, and I find myself unable to tolerate everything. Today, involuntarily raised my voice at my mother. Mom, some money from my wallet is missing. Did you take it again? What a terrible accusation. I needed some money for clothes, so I borrowed it temporarily. Borrowed? You've never once repaid the money I've lent you. Please stop taking it without asking for permission. Do you even realize who you owe for your upbringing? It's all thanks to me. You're so frustrating. I acknowledge I owe you, Mom, but this isn't the way to repay the favor. Now that you're self-sufficient, it's only fair to take care of me. Don't complain about borrowing a few $100s. This happens every single time. Every time I confront my mother, she retorts with statements like, I'm the one who raised you, or do you realize who you owe for your upbringing? Leaving me without words. I understand that my mother worked hard to raise me, making it challenging to argue back. To be honest, I have a decent salary and money isn't an issue for me. Even if I handed my mother $2,000 every month, it wouldn't significantly impact my lifestyle. Nonetheless, I've always felt the need to establish boundaries and not let my mother take advantage indefinitely. One day, after wrapping up my work and returning home, I was surprised to find Tom and Catherine there. The last time we crossed paths was at my father's funeral, and we hadn't stayed in touch since then. Hey, Emily, it's been a while. You still have that gloomy aura around you, huh? My brother's insensitivity remained unchanged. He had a knack for looking down on me and poking fun since our childhood. Why are you here, Tom? Do I need a reason to visit my parents' house? We demolished our family home after Dad passed away, and I'm the one renting this apartment. Don't be so uptight. Our family is finally together after so long. As we exchanged words, Catherine interjected, Emily, you're as uptight as ever. With that kind of attitude, you'll never get married. Catherine, Tom's wife, would make such remarks without a hint of remorse. Her comment, much like Tom's behavior, was tactless. I've harbored a dislike for the two of them for quite some time. After having dinner alone, I retreated to my room. My mother, evidently delighted to see Tom after such a long time, kept chatting animatedly with a smile on her face. It appeared that the three of them occasionally indulged in gossip about me. Since that day, for some inexplicable reason, Tom and Catherine began making more frequent visits to my place. Another irksome aspect was their apparent disregard for the fact that this was my home. They seemed excessively at ease in my apartment. "Hey, Tom, what's going on? This is my place, you know. What about your job? You're so bothersome. What does it matter to you? I'm here because I'm concerned about Mom and I want to visit her often. You never reached out once since our father's funeral. It's none of your business. Come to think of it, I'm hungry. Cook something and do it quickly. What's with this guy? Seriously, this is my place, isn't it? Why are they lounging around as if they own the place? I'm in the mood for a delicious cake, Emily. Buy me one." Catherine's request prompts even my mother to join in. "You finished work today, right? So you have time. Hurry up and go buy it for us, you lazy girl." It's perplexing how Catherine, who once avoided living with my mother and detested her, has suddenly become quite chummy with her. As for Tom, he's adopting an attitude of, "I'm the eldest son, and Catherine is the eldest son's wife, so it's only natural for us to be concerned about Mom." Observing their behavior, it's evident that the two of them are plotting something. I'm not entirely sure about their intentions yet, but it's clear it's not something favorable. Several days passed, and Tom and Catherine's scheme finally unfolded. "Emily, I've reached my limit living with you. I've decided to end this cohabitation." I was engrossed in household chores on my day off when my mother dropped this bombshell. "What do you mean by that?" "Exactly what I said. I can't endure living with someone as slow, lazy, and unattractive as you any longer." "What are you talking about? Don't you understand? I've made up my mind. I'm going to live with Tom and Catherine." "You're going to live with Tom and Catherine." I was so taken aback by this unexpected revelation from my mother that I unintentionally echoed her words. The couple who consistently opposed the idea of living with my mother now wants to share a residence with her. What on earth is happening? Just then, Tom and Catherine conveniently arrived. "Tom, what's happening? You never expressed any interest before, and you consistently asserted you'd never lived with Mom, right? What's the issue with that? It's only natural for the eldest son to live with his own mother, isn't it?" Tom, looking down on me with a sense of superiority, made this statement. "Don't tell me you have some kind of issue. If you can't live with Mom, no, that's not what I'm saying. But then it's fine for Mom to live with us, right? Are you serious?" Even Catherine was vehemently against cohabitation. "Why the sudden change? You're so bothersome. Anyway, Mom has decided to live with us. We don't need you anymore. Just leave." "Wait, leave? After all this time when I took care of everything about Mom?" It can't help but feel repulsed by my brother's arrogant words. However, it became evident that Tom and Catherine were up to something nefarious. Despite my mother's sharp tongue, she remains my only precious parent. Besides, I wouldn't want to get entangled in any trouble later on. I decided to caution my mother. "Mom, isn't it clear that something's amiss? After all, Tom and his wife never once reached out to us before. What are you talking about? If anyone's acting strange, it's you, isn't it? Huh? Mom, those who just exploit their parents should leave." The moment she said that, any remaining affection I had for my mother vanished instantly. After all the support I've provided and taking care of her, how dare she utter such words to her own daughter who has been supporting her all these years? But this is the only time they can mock me like this, you know. After a week, they'll experience hell, so they better relish this moment. I began plotting my retaliation against them. "Then I'll leave right now." I declared this resolutely to my brother, his wife, and my mother. The three of them began to chat, exchanging smirks. "Emily, you're finally leaving the house. Mom, you must be so happy." "I truly am. Now I can live with Tom and Catherine. I'm on top of the world. From now on, I'll be the one taking care of Mom. Thank you, Tom. I'm also thrilled that I can live with my beloved mother-in-law from now on. Oh, thank you too, Catherine. The three of them continued their frivolous conversation. To be honest, I was struggling not to laugh at that moment, but I can't let them perceive that I have any room to execute my revenge flawlessly. It's best to lay low for now. From that day forward, my brother and his wife seemed to be a constant presence in my apartment. As for me, it's as if I'm invisible to them, or rather, they treated me as if I never existed in the first place. However, this turned out to be advantageous for me because I wasn't bothered at all while preparing to move out. A week later, it was my moving day. The moment he opened his mouth, Tom said, "Today is the day we part ways, Emily. We'll be taking care of Mom from now on, so you can live without any worries. Thank you. I'm leaving Mom in your hands." Okay, after delivering this casual statement, Tom seemed somewhat dissatisfied with my response. Then my mother approached. "I hope you get married soon, Emily. It'd be a shame to remain single for the rest of your life, wouldn't it? You know the whole society would call a person like you a loser." In response to my mother's words, Tom and his wife snickered. Facing her remarks, I replied calmly, "That's true. From now on, I've decided to live just for myself. I mean, I no longer have to take care of you now, right? Just stop talking and get out. I never asked you to look after me. I was going to leave quickly anyway. Oh, it seems like they've arrived." I heard the doorbell ring, so I made my way to the entrance. It was the movers from the moving company I had scheduled for today. After having them transport all the belongings from my room, I gestured towards the living room and instructed the movers, "Oh, and please relocate all the appliances and furniture in these rooms too." Huh, the dumbfounded voices of the three harmonized perfectly. They were utterly perplexed by what was unfolding. That TV, the fridge, the microwave. Oh, and this cleaning robot too. Also, the sofa, dining table, and the bed. Please move everything. Then my mother started to argue. What? What are you thinking? Stop this immediately. What do you mean? Am I doing something strange? Don't play dumb. Taking all the appliances and furniture from this house. Have you lost your mind? In response, my brother, his face as red as a tomato, approached me aggressively. Yo, listen to Mom. How do you expect us to live without any furniture or appliances? You have no right to take everything. Leave everything here and just go. My mother and brother were quarreling in front of me. Realizing I shouldn't waste any more time, I decided to clarify the situation for the two. Hey, are you getting the wrong idea or something? Everything in this apartment, including the apartment itself and all its appliances and furniture, belongs to me. You know this is Mom's place, right? Don't mess with me. All the furniture and appliances were bought using the inheritance from Dad, weren't they? As I had anticipated, he misunderstood and believed that my mother was financing everything in my apartment. He assumed she had received a significant inheritance from my father and had cleverly convinced them to live with her. Tom, aren't you misunderstanding something? I bought everything in here. I've been giving Mom a monthly support of $2,000, you know. Thus losses. You just want to live with Mom, don't you? Someday I'll inherit Dad's inheritance. What are you talking about? Mom used up all of Dad's inheritance a long time ago. Tom nervously glanced at our mother, who was looking down with a pale face. Mom, please explain. You told us you bought all the appliances in here. Well, I was just trying to look good. What do you mean by that? We only moved in with you because we thought there was an inheritance from Dad. If there's no inheritance, what's the point of living together? Wait, what are you saying? Didn't you say you take care of me because you're the eldest son? I was just trying to be nice. I lied so that we can live together. Upon discovering there was no remaining inheritance, Tom was furious. And my mother was deeply shaken by the revelation that the kindness displayed by Tom and his wife was all a facade. What a dysfunctional family, huh? My mother should have been suspicious when Tom and his wife, who had been out of touch for a while, suddenly suggested living together. If Tom had kept in touch, he would have learned sooner that there was no inheritance left from Dad. As I cast cold glances at the two, Tom's wife seemed to have a solution and spoke up. "I've got it. It would be great if Emily could live with us again." To this, my mother and Tom both agreed. "That's right, Emily. You should live with us. After all, yes, Emily, I really do need you." Observing the sudden change in their attitude as they began speaking for their own convenience, I promptly dismissed them. "What are you even saying? Don't make me laugh. There's no way I'd live with deceitful people like you all. I've decided to live only for myself from now on. Whatever happens to you all, I couldn't care less. But why don't you all just happily ruin your lives together?" The three of them, completely drained of energy, sat down on the spot as if their knees had given away. All three had vacant eyes. Goodbye. Do your best as a family. With that, I closed the front door. In just another 2 weeks, the lease for the apartment would end because it's under my name. They'll probably be forced to leave when the lease is up. Well, it's none of my business anymore. About a week after successfully settling into my new place, as anticipated, I received a call from my mother seeking help. "Emily, please. I can't live properly like this. Come back. There's no way I'm returning. Why don't you have that foolish couple take care of you?" Actually, it seems they quit their jobs and moved here, thinking I still had your father's inheritance. They really are terrible people, aren't they? I don't feel inclined to help at all. I no longer need a couple who only cares about money. All I have is you, Emily. Mom, I'm busy. Can I hang up now, please? Emily, help me. I hung up before she could finish and blocked her number. The desire to assist my mother is long gone, especially not now. Rumors circulated that my mother and Tom's family were evicted from the apartment after that incident. They depleted all of Tom's savings to move into a rundown apartment. Apparently, my mother doesn't work, and she argues with Catherine almost every day. Tom is the sole breadwinner, toiling from dawn till dusk just to make ends meet. As for me, after distancing myself from my mother, I've managed to save more money and use it for my own needs. After all the sacrifices I've made in the past, aim to lead a life that brings me happiness from now on. Weren't you with Dad? Chris, my 5-year-old daughter, came home from a trip to my in-laws' house drenched. Her lips were blue, and she was shaking. I left her with my husband, Andrew, so why did she come home by herself? I called Andrew out of shock, but his tone was the same as always. He said, "I didn't bring Chris along." I didn't understand what he meant. I didn't know it, but this remark was hiding the craziest secret. My name is So Moore, and I'm 32 years old. The little girl in front of me is Chris, who is 5 years old. When we first got married, we were very close. I remember how happy we were to hug each other when I told him I was pregnant. I went back to work a year after giving birth and was happy with my life. But at some point, our happy life changed. Housework is the wife's job, even though my wife and I used to do things like housework and cleaning together. 2 years ago, Andrew all of a sudden started giving me all of the housework. "But I work too, and I need your help," I said. "My friend says that even if both of them work, their wives do all the housework." He replied, "You should clean up more," and threw a ragged mop at my face. From then on, he was always saying bad things about the way I cleaned. He would often say to that person, "You should take a leaf out of her book." That was Marion Kirk, who works as a maid for his parents. Andrew's dad ran a business and lived in a fancy house. Andrew also worked for him. Chris was also old enough that she couldn't be left alone, but Andrew didn't do much to help with parenting. "Hey, what do you think Chris would like for her birthday present?" I showed him a toy catalog in the living room late at night, after our daughter had gone to bed. But he only looked at the cover briefly before putting it down. "Why do we have to think about things that are so unpleasant? She's our daughter," I told her. "Aren't you a little cold?" "It's a waste of money because kids get bored so quickly," he said. "I'm not spending a dime on it." Andrew yelled as he stormed off to his room with the catalog in his hands. I thought he was refusing our daughter, so I wanted to talk to him about it. But Chris woke up and said, "Mommy, I need to go to the toilet." This meant that the birthday present talk had to be put on hold. We never found a good time to talk again, and I ended up spending my own money on something a toy shop worker suggested. "I'll tell Chris it's a present from both Mom and Dad," I chose. I couldn't describe how I felt as I watched her happily tear the packing paper. At the same time, Andrew started spending a lot of money on himself that he wasn't making. "It's for socializing for work," he told me. The fact that hundreds of dollars were being spent every week, though, made me worry about what he was doing. "Hey, is it really just a work party?" I wanted to know. "What? You don't believe me?" "It's not that. I just think you might be spending too much," I told her. "I'm going to be the president of the company one day. I'll pay it all back then, so don't be so petty," Andrew said. He wouldn't listen and kept using the credit card, which put our money in danger since I wasn't making any money. I started to get mad at my husband because of this. But because Andrew and I came from different places, I couldn't fully blame him. Because his mom was a stay-at-home mom, he thinks cleaning is something only women do. Since my husband is the hair, he may be going through things I can't even imagine. I chose to be patient until he realized that women work too. I promised to help him as much as I could until he becomes a great CEO like his dad and is more at ease with his life. After some time, it was a Sunday in the middle of March. Yesterday was my mother-in-law's birthday, and every year we celebrated at my in-laws' house. Their house is just down the road from ours, about a 15-minute walk at an adult's pace. It might take more than twice as long with Chris, though, because she always wants to stop at the park on the way. Also, staying the night before these kinds of important events have become the norm. I can't wait to see Grandpa and Grandma. Chris loved going to see them every time. But I had to go to work on the Saturday before my mother-in-law's birthday, right as we were getting ready to leave with our bags from my in-laws' house. "Mommy's got to work. Should we go to Grandma's house tomorrow?" Chris was always a pleasure to be around because he was so mature for his age. I did feel bad, though, about making my in-laws take care of a kindergartner. "No, I want to go," Chris said. She was ready to go and had her favorite toys packed in her backpack. "If we stay, what should we do? Should I take care of her?" "Let's go to my dad's house by ourselves then." "But it's okay, I'll talk to them," he said, picking up the phone and calling my in-laws before I could answer. He began to describe our situation. I took Andrew's phone to at least thank my in-laws because I wanted to. I said, "I'm sorry I forced Chris on you. We're family. There's no need for formalities." "Thank you." That's right, I thought to myself. With the maid and Andrew with her, there's not much to worry about. My husband still doesn't want to help with childcare, but I held my cool and didn't let that show. They finally left our house in the afternoon, and I chose to finish my work and visit my in-laws the next day. I'm off. I quickly grabbed my work bag and got ready to go to the office. There wasn't a cloud in the sky at that time. But as time went on, the weather got worse, and by evening, it was pouring down rain. "It's cold," as if to tell the future. After getting home early from work, I stayed up until 6 p.m. to rest. I was in the middle of getting ready for a relaxing bath when the doorbell at the front door rang. I was shocked to see Chris, who was drenched. "Chris, weren't you supposed to go to Grandma's house with Dad?" Chris was shaking because it was so cold. Her lips turned blue, and when I held her hands, they were as cold as ice. She said in a shaking voice, "I couldn't get into the house because I didn't have the keys." But I couldn't understand what was going on. I chose to let her take a bath first, though, because she looked so tired. In the meantime, I called Andrew to let him know what was going on. I asked, What's going on here? I forgot to bring her to my dad's house, he said. What? I believed you were looking after her. How could I know? She left on her own. Our daughter started crying out loud on the way to my in-laws, saying she didn't want to go unless mommy was with her. Even though my husband tried to calm her down, she refused to listen and went back home by herself. However, since it's a straightforward route to our house and she has walked it several times before, I thought she would be fine alone, so she headed to my in-laws' place on her own. I thought you'd be busy with work, so I didn't contact you. Wait a minute, didn't you say you were heading to your parents' house right after lunch? That was at 6:30 p.m. Chris shouldn't have been on her way to visit my in-laws at that time. Now that I think about it. I had some errands to take care of. It got late because I was wrapping those up. Still, I couldn't stand the fact that he let our daughter come home alone while she was drenched. Why didn't you at least give her an umbrella? I tried to, but she said she didn't need it and ran off. But before I could say anything, Andrew, who had been pretty calm up until then, became angry. You fuss too much. It's all your fault. Why is she such a bad child? She is not spoiled at all, no matter how I raise our daughter. Hearing that from my husband, who never paid attention to our daughter, made me so mad that I had to raise my voice. However, he refused to take responsibility for what he did. He finished the call by saying, "She is safe, so there's no problem," and then hung up by himself. When I tried to call him back, it looked like he had turned off his phone, and my in-law's number was set to message. I thought the only thing left to do was talk to her at this point. After things calmed down, I asked her to come over. Why didn't you visit your grandmother today? You were excited about it. I asked. She looked down and her eyes lost their sparkle. I asked, "Is that true?" As she slowly opened her mouth to talk. She gave a deep nod, but there were still a lot of questions. I looked into everything I could in a short amount of time. That's what it was. Then I learned the shocking truth through something I didn't expect. This is terrible. I clenched my hands and said, I will never forgive them. I was determined to get back at the person who had caused my daughter so much pain. I then yelled at my in-laws, "I'll be bringing Chris over tomorrow." And I couldn't sleep that night because I was so mad. I went to my in-laws' house the next day. Even the cleaner hadn't come yet. At 8:00 a.m., my daughter was playing in a room upstairs. So I went to the living room on the first floor, where my husband was still sleeping and snoring. "We need to talk," I told him, nudging him awake. "What's the big idea of waking me up so early in the morning?" He was upset. Hey, why do Mom and Dad look so scary? Just sit down. Today is my mother-in-law's birthday, so I really did not want to set up this meeting in the first place. But my mother-in-law thought something wasn't right over the phone and said it would be better to talk about important things right away instead of later. I need you to do it quickly. He was initially complaining a lot, but after receiving a reprimand from his father, who is also the CEO of the company he works for, he reluctantly followed instructions. Hey, why did she come back yesterday so wet? Did I not tell you that she started to fuss and say she wanted to go back halfway through? Then what is this supposed to be? On the big screen of the TV, I showed a certain movie. What is this? He looked shocked, and he had good reason to be. The screen showed him and Marion, the maid, hugging each other tightly in the living room of my in-laws' house, as if they were in love. When did you film this? This was really filmed with a toy camera I got her for her birthday. Andrew and the maid must not have known they were being watched because the camera was small and looked like a toy. Chris didn't really know how to use the camera, and she didn't seem to know that she was filming them. When I found this video while investigating, I was really shocked. The two in the video paid no attention to the lens. You said you came here in the evening, but you actually left the house right after lunch, didn't you? Well, that's because. And you planned to hang out with her while your parents were away. I can't believe the housekeeper slept with you. My in-laws were at the department store when they got to my in-laws' house because the birthday present they had ordered was being brought. I had already confirmed this detail over the phone with them. So you told her to play near the park because she was in the way, And then you locked her out? Who told you that, Chris? She said she couldn't get into the house because she didn't have the keys, but I didn't understand what she meant, I asked. She said he didn't answer the knock, and he was told she walked to the park. But no one came to get her, and it began to rain, which made things even worse. She did what after I told him not to tell anyone? He made a face and clicked his tongue. The park and our house are very close, and she was able to see the lights on at home and figured I had come back. How could you do such a thing while our daughter was around? Before my husband kicked her out of the house, it looked like my daughter was really into hitting the camera buttons. She didn't seem to see her father having an affair, which was the only good thing about the circumstances. He put his hands together and said, "This was a one-time mistake. I'm sorry. But I had one more trick up my sleeve." "Oh, then how do you explain this?" I threw a bunch of love letters on the table. They seemed to be from Andrew to Marion. "You went through my room without permission. You're the one who said I should clean up more, so I just happened to find it while cleaning every nook and cranny." He worked hard to get the stack of love letters together, but I quickly grabbed one of them. "Let's see. To my beloved Marion." "Do you call her that? Please stop it. I love you so much. I can't wait to kiss you." Sounds like something a middle schooler wrote. How embarrassing. As red as a crab that had been boiled. He put his hands over his ears. I gave him credit card bills and loan papers that I found in his room's trash as the last blow. "You are setting aside a lot of money to buy women's brand name items. Additionally, you have taken on nearly the same amount of debt, right?" I clearly matched the numbers on the two papers with my finger. "You said you were spending money for work, but you were just splurging on your mistress." Based on the dates on the loan papers and love letters, the most recent one was from 3 years ago. It seems this was not just a one-time mistake. Even though he hadn't said a word until then, my father-in-law finally broke down and spoke. "You are despicable. But I can't help it. Marion is cuter than you after all. Are you serious?" My husband's dad gave Andrew a mean look, but Andrew didn't seem to care. He imagined himself and made a sleazy grin with his lips spread wide. "Marion thinks of me first, and besides, she has a great body. Be quiet." "Hey, don't start yelling all of a sudden. You scared me." My husband's father yelled at Andrew, and my wife's mother stood next to him and quietly agreed. He also said that the maid would be fired soon. He begged his parents to forgive him, but they didn't pay any attention. He then tried to pull his arm around my shoulder in a cheeky way. "Can't you just make nice with my parents?" "Why should I have to do that?" "Because you're my wife, right? Wives should do what their husbands tell them to do. Don't rely on me only when it's convenient for you." I pushed his hand away hard and pushed him away with both hands. "I'm planning to consult a lawyer." "Are you serious about that?" "I intend to sue for child support, so be prepared." His parents told him to please think about this again after firing him from his job. He must have felt like he couldn't take me leaving him either. He bowed to me several times while sweating heavily. "Please don't abandon me." Unexpectedly, he began to cry, and his face was covered in snot and tears. He looked sad. "What you say won't change my mind, no matter what you say." Finally, my husband screamed, "I'm so sorry. Please forgive me," as he got down on his knees. But because my husband was greedy, our daughter Chris had to be alone in the park in the rain and pain for a while. He had been hurting our family for years. There was no longer any reason to feel sorry for him. "I don't want to see your face or Chris ever again." Saying goodbye. I felt terrible because he stayed on the floor and cried as I left my in-laws' house. After that, we split up and agreed to pay each other $1,000 a month in child support. I sued the maid for $20,000 too. It is said that he works late at night at several physical labor jobs because he lost his job and has bills to pay. He hates living in a small room that doesn't have a bathtub. The maid broke up with him and went back to her city, where her parents scolded her very badly and left her with nowhere to go. I've heard she works for the NTI now. In the meantime, Chris and I moved into an apartment and began a new life together. I got a raise in pay because my work was noticed and appreciated. Chris is excited for school to start in April and is working hard on her writing. The best thing about my life is watching her. Going on school trips costs a lot, especially if you go to a private school. You're probably not used to these expenses since you went to public school. It might be too much for you to pay for it. But don't worry, I'll get you a souvenir. The teacher in charge of my daughter's class is really straightforward, but sometimes he sounds like he's talking down to her. No one should talk down to or ignore others, especially not a teacher to a student. I'm Natalie. My brother and I were left without parents when we were young because they died in a bad car crash. I was only 8, and my brother was 15. After our parents died, our relatives had to figure out what to do with us. We didn't have many family members, and no one had enough money to take care of both of us. They said, "We can't handle both of them because we're struggling to raise even one." They already had 2 kids of their own, so having twice as many was out of the question. We realized that all we had left in life was each other. I was just a 3rd grader, clinging tightly to my brother. I cried constantly, and he felt helpless seeing me go through so much. At 15, he was barely an adult, and I was still a child. He could only do so much to help. After a while, one relative agreed to take me in. "Sorry, but we can't take both of you," they said. "We thought one of you could stay with us, and the other could go to a foster home or shelter." I understood the situation, but I knew being separated would make things even harder. "Please take care of her. I'll go to the foster home," my brother insisted, sacrificing for me. "I'll be okay. Just because I'm in foster care doesn't mean I won't be looked after," he assured me, holding my hand tightly. He made me feel like I deserved it, like he wanted this for me. As he held my hand, I couldn't help but cry and beg him to stay. The family that took me in didn't seem too thrilled, and I always felt like a stranger in their home, like there was a divide between us. I felt so alone. The shelter where my brother stayed was really far away. It was tough being apart, but we kept in touch by phone whenever we could. Even though I was with my relatives, my brother was my only real family. Without him, I started feeling more and more alone. I've always been sensitive and creative. I love expressing myself and letting my imagination run wild. As I felt lonelier, my emotions got stronger, and I started withdrawing into myself. Through middle and high school, that feeling of loneliness stuck with me. I began pouring my feelings onto paper, crafting imaginative stories that flowed naturally from my mind. When I shared some of my writing with my brother, he praised it and urged me to keep going. He said, "This is something special." After graduating, I dove into job hunting. With my passion for reading, I landed a job at a small publishing company that focused on literary magazines. If it had been a bigger company, I might not have applied, not because I wasn't qualified, but because it wouldn't have felt right for me. I put everything I have into my writing. It's kind of an obsession for me. I wanted to show my gratitude to the family who took me in and reassure my brother that I'm doing fine. Starting my first job was tough, and I made my fair share of mistakes, but I kept pushing myself, and before I knew it, 5 years had flown by. At the time, I was working in the editorial department, assisting one of the top writers. This writer had real talent and even won an award for his work. As his editor, I did my best to help him whenever he hit a roadblock. I shared my creative insights and gave feedback to help him improve. When my boss praised me, saying, "Natalie, I don't know what I'd do without your creative mind," it felt incredible. We had a strong bond in our working relationship, and then he surprised me by saying, "Natalie, you're not just the perfect partner at work, but in life too. Will you marry me?" I was totally caught off guard by his proposal. It was unexpected, especially since we hadn't openly dated or been romantically involved. But considering how close we were from working together, we knew a lot about each other. So I said, "Yes, I want to spend forever with you," and it just felt right. My brother was thrilled about our wedding. We hadn't spent much time together since we lived apart, so I couldn't wait to see him again. My husband understood how important it was for me to reconnect with my brother, and he was looking forward to meeting him too. My husband told me about his involvement with the shelter and the kids there. He didn't just contribute financially, he was actively mentoring and supporting the children. "There's one kid in particular who really stands out," he said. "He's driven and hardworking, and he even calls me Big Bro." He was glowing with pride, and I couldn't help but feel proud of him too. 2 years into our marriage, we were getting ready to welcome a new addition to our family. My husband's writing was gaining recognition, and he credited it to my advice and support. "Thank you for always believing in me. I love you," he'd say, making me feel so appreciated. Our daughter, Nicole, was born, and our lives were filled with joy and excitement. She was bursting with energy, and we were over the moon. One day, as I looked in the mirror, I realized that the loneliness and sadness I once felt had vanished. I smiled at my reflection, feeling grateful for everything I had overcome. Nicole blossomed into a kind and bright child. Before we knew it, my husband and I decided to enroll her in a private school. We found one that focused on nurturing independent and creative thinkers, offering a well-rounded education in academics, athletics, and the arts. Nicole thrived in that environment. Our careers were going well too. But when Nicole started 4th grade, we received devastating news about my husband. He was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and it had already spread too far for treatment by the time we found out. We went to the hospital together, but I returned home alone. I stayed by his side, praying for a miracle, but it wasn't meant to be. I was scared that the loneliness I once felt would return, but this time I had Nicole. I had to stay strong for her. I changed my mindset and focused on moving forward. Nicole and I leaned on each other for support as we faced life without my husband. Every moment became more precious, and I vowed to cherish every second. As Nicole started her final year of elementary school, she was nervous about meeting new classmates and teachers, but she knew she could handle it by the time. As the first semester ended, I noticed Nicole became increasingly quiet about school, especially after spring break. Starting the second semester of 5th grade, she seemed even more distant. My worry grew. Was she not enjoying school? Was she being bullied? But as the second semester neared its end, nothing changed. Today, I had to confront her. I couldn't ignore it any longer. "Hi, I'm Nicole, and I'm in 5th grade. Last year, my dad passed away, and it was really tough for me and my mom. But my uncle helped us through it, and I'm grateful my mom was able to heal. I was excited to start 5th grade, even though I knew I have a new teacher and classmates, except for one friend from last year. Our teacher is 28 and has been teaching for 6 years. He kind of gives off an older, annoying brother vibe. Our teacher wanted to get to know us better, so he had us fill out a get-to-know-me worksheet. Then he planned to interview us individually based on our answers. When it was finally my turn, he said, 'Your favorite subject is English, right?' I love reading too. But then he mentioned my dad's passing and my mom raising me alone, and I didn't like his tone. 'Just wondering, what does your mom do for work?' My mom works as a contract employee at a publishing company. After my dad passed away, she switched from full-time to contract work for the flexibility. I told her she didn't have to, but she prefers it. It's kind of like working part-time. How do you guys afford the school? You must be having a tough time." It felt like my teacher assumed we were barely getting by. It didn't seem sincere. Then he made more comments about our finances, like he pitied us, like we were pathetic. His attitude during that conversation really bothered me, so I tried to avoid him afterward. But he kept approaching me, usually when I was alone, and would say things like, "Struggling with money is stressful, right? Is your mom still working part-time? Can you afford next semester's tuition?" I tried to brush it off and be mature about it. Once, I even argued back, saying we weren't poor, but he didn't stop. So I decided it was best to keep my distance. He laughs and thinks it's because he's right. I decided to stop talking to my mom about school altogether because I didn't want to involve her. I could tell she was getting worried about me. Then, over spring break, my teacher assigned us a book to read, a popular novel by an author named Kiri. The main character had a tough childhood but eventually succeeded in life. After class, my teacher approached me when I was alone. That book starts with a rough childhood, which a bit hits close to home for you, he said. But let's be real, life isn't like a fairy tale. People from poor backgrounds usually stay that way. It's a cycle, you know? He laughed and sarcastically apologized for making me read it. I felt so alone and powerless. I couldn't believe he was my teacher. I dreaded going back to school after spring break. I wanted to change my attitude to stop worrying my mom, but my teacher kept picking on me. I couldn't understand why he enjoyed taunting me. I tried ignoring him, but one day I couldn't take it anymore and snapped back. He was speechless at first, then angry. As he walked away, he muttered, "You're a feisty one, aren't you? I'll remember this." That's when I realized I should have just ignored him. At the end of the school year, there's this big 5th grade field trip everyone's excited about, even though it's not happening yet. People in class started buzzing about it, and once again, the teacher singled me out. Those school trips are pricey, especially compared to public schools. Wonder if you'll have to sell the house to afford it, he said with a smirk. I'm looking forward to it, but hey, don't sweat it if you can't make it. It's a luxury, and you've got more important things to worry about. Better to stay home. He even hinted it would be better for the school if I didn't go, like payback for snapping at him. Then there was this incident where a classmate's Nintendo Switch went missing. The teacher had insinuated that kids from poor families might have stolen it out of jealousy, looking straight at me. My friend started asking questions, but I kept quiet to avoid his smart remarks. Later, when we were discussing middle school plans, the teacher suggested I reconsider staying at the private school. He doubted my mom could afford it and suggested we look into public school instead. He kept belittling us, saying it's stupid to stretch beyond our means. I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed out of the conference, tears streaming down my face. I was so frustrated with him. When I got home, my mom sat me down and asked what was really going on, so I told her everything. I was speechless hearing my daughter's words. I couldn't believe she'd been dealing with harassment at school, especially from her teacher. She didn't want me to worry, so she kept it all inside. I hugged her tight, apologizing for not knowing. I knew I had to talk to the teacher right away. I decided to record our conversation on my phone, just in case. I assumed you'd be working hard, just like I am. His response confirmed my daughter's story. I demanded to know why he felt entitled to speak so horribly to Nicole. It was my duty as a parent to make her aware, even though it should be his job as a teacher, a responsibility he seemed to overlook. He had the audacity to suggest we send Nicole to public school if we were struggling financially, but he was wrong. We've never faced financial instability in our lives. His assumptions about our situation were unfounded. He kept interrupting and talking over me, making it impossible for us to have a civil conversation. His immature remarks pushed me to my limit. I warned him sternly, "That's enough. Don't ever speak to my daughter like that again, or there will be consequences." With that, I stormed out, leaving him speechless. After our confrontation, Nicole said he stopped bothering her altogether. I was surprised she let it go so easily, but thankfully, she made it through to graduation unscathed. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it to the parent-teacher conference afterward. Nicole confidently chose to attend the same middle school as her friends, despite the teacher's mocking laughter. "I'm here with my sister for my niece's graduation," Joseph said, suddenly realizing that Nicole was his niece, and then recognizing me as his sister. It was time for me to set the record straight. My late husband was a renowned writer, and we still receive royalties from his work. We're financially secure because of that. Plus, I have my own steady income. He was stunned. The author Kiri, whose work inspired you and whom you admired, is actually me. It's a pseudonym I used. You can imagine the royalties from that alone. My husband and I enjoyed collaborating, but I also wanted to pursue my own writing. After his passing, I shifted to a more flexible job to focus on my writing full-time. I poured my heart into my writing, and as I continued, I improved. I couldn't have stopped working altogether, but I enjoy the company and value the routine. That's how I finally completed my book. Joseph saw parallels between his upbringing and the author's story, but instead of overcoming his past, he projected his resentments onto others, including my daughter. He wrongly assumed my family was struggling and belittled us. Such behavior is unacceptable, especially from a teacher. He's not fit for the role. He didn't respond and instead broke down in tears in front of everyone. My brother reported him to the principal, leading to Joseph's swift termination. I provided the principal with recorded evidence of my confrontation with Joseph, which left my brother speechless upon hearing. He expressed disappointment in Joseph's true character and doubted Joseph's ability to continue teaching with such behavior. I realized I had misjudged him. Don't worry. People like him are rare, otherwise the world would be doomed. I hope I never become like that. My brother chuckled at Joseph's behavior. You should focus on your own happiness now. I'm content, and you don't need to worry about me. Maybe it's time for you to start dating. What about you? You could date and be even happier. As long as you're happy, I'm happy. But a new dad? My daughter is wise beyond her years. She's my happiness. Why do we feel so alone? Is it in our minds, or do we close ourselves off from seeing the beauty around us? The answer lies within our hearts.